Hess King Lasswell is out and available now, guys. He did get some pretty significant buffs coming from the JP side to the global side. If you saw how Radiant Lightning was buffed and changed for the global version of FFBE from the JP version, this is going to be a very similar sort of situation. Lengthier durations to the buffs from his cooldown skills in his limit burst, which is going to be a very nice thing as far as damage is concerned for him, as well as some changes to his cooldown skill, decreased recast time and lengthier duration in those situations as well. Before we get into that, I want to let you guys know, if you are looking for another way to support the channel membership thing is now live. It will help me create future content for you guys on this channel, guys. So that support, very much appreciated. If that's something that you're looking into, some sort of rewards there. On top of that, you get some cool little badges in chat when you leave a comment. There's also access to these videos earlier than usual, as soon as they get uploaded, instead of when they are predetermined to go live in the future, whenever I do upload these videos, which is daily. So if that's something that you're looking into, go ahead and feel free to do that. If you don't want to, totally fine. Thank you so much for the continued support in the view of the channel. So here we go. Hess King Lasswell. Chaining family, it says absolute mirror of equity, Aurora Ray, and Divine Ruination. As far as you're concerned, he's really only going to be an absolute mirror of equity chaining frame character. That's where all of his damage does come from. His team order is the Blade Art Succession. It gives him 50% attack when equipped with a katana, as well as 50% true dual hand or true double hand. So very powerful, especially for him. It's going to be able to proc his Trust Master ability, which is also going to be something that is extremely strong. You're going to want to have his Trust Master ability procced at all times. His super team art is the True Purple Lightning. Very simple, 180 attack, two-handed katana with a normal variance range here. It actually goes from 105 to 155% there. And then the two-handed weapon, and then it gives you Hess King's Ambition. So this is going to look like a wall of text here. Basically, it gives a 0.5 multiplier increase to any sort of mirror equity skill that exists in Final Fantasy Brave Exvius. So 0.5 mod, a little small bump, depending on how those skills are calculated, right? If it's a 2, ignore 50%, front-loaded, back-loaded, it'll go anywhere up to a 2.0. But for Hess King Lasswell, his main damage dealing skills actually get a 1.5 multiplier bump there, and a 7% MP refresh per turn is the other part of Hess King's Ambition. It's very powerful for him. 180 attack, 200 katana. If you already have a two-handed katana, it's not like going to make or break him. It's going to give him a 1.5 times mod on his main damage dealing skill there. So super team art, True Purple Lightning, very strong. Now let's go into his weapon selection here. He does have swords, great swords, and katanas. As you saw from his Trust Master reward, he is very katana proficient. You're going to be wanting to use a katana most times on Hess King Lasswell. And he does also have another 50% katana mastery in his passives as well. So he gets 100% attack from katanas if you're using his Trust Master reward, and then his passive increase. He also has hats, helms, clothing, light armor, and heavy armor for selection on his armor. It's very powerful selection there. Now his skills we're going to be going over as usual. His best skills, we're going to be leaving out the ones that you guys will never be using for the most part. So nothing like finger snap with a dispel. Pretty cool, but not that big of a deal. He has success through conviction, which is going to be a cooldown skill available at level 1 5-star. It's a 3-turn cooldown available on turn 3. Physical damage 16 times multiplier with ignore 50% defense to one enemy. This is the absolute mirror of equity chaining frame family. And then it also gives a multiplier buff of 0.5 for 2 turns to the caster for some various mirror of equity skills. The most important one here being mirror of equity universe, which is going to be his main damage dealing skill, and we'll be getting to that in the future. He does have a defense and spirit break of 50% to one enemy, as well with mirror of equity resolution, but not that big of a deal. He does have fire damage here with a mirror of equity, blazing fire, and ice damage with freezing chill. Not that big of a deal. Aurora Ray chaining skill as well. Then we have his 2 imbues. We have mirror of equity, petals of flame, and mirror of equity, petals of frost. Both of these are absolute mirror of equity chaining frame families. They have low multipliers, 4.5, but they give you the respective elemental imbues for 5 turns. So you have a 5-turn fire imbue with a petals of flame, and a 5-turn ice imbue with petals of frost. These also do give a very small elemental resist buff of 30% to the respective element as well. So the fire imbue is going to give everyone a 30% fire resist buff. The ice imbue is going to give everyone a 30% Iced Resist buff. Swords of Rising Sun and Sword of Polaris. These do unlock triple cast for you. You can use them in a pinch. They are Divine Ruination Chain family, very low multiplier. They also either will restore 3000 HP or 100 MP, depending on which one you decide to use. You're only going to be using these if your triple cast somehow gets knocked out, your last will's die on a bunch, something of that nature. Absolute Mirror of Equity used to be his big damage dealing skill. It's still available to him. Starts at a 4.0 multiplier on the back end side, all the way up to a 10.0 multiplier. This is not a skill that we're going to be using either. He does have double cast here with double katana arts. Passively, he has Pyroglacial Destruction, 7 times mod, Absolute Mirror of Equity, Chaining Frame Family, decrease fire and ice resist by 80% there. True Mirror of Equity is a cooldown skill that you're going to be getting at 7 stars. It's a 2-turn cooldown available on turn 2. Physical damage 1.0 mod to one enemy with physical damage 10 times mod with ignore 50% defense to one enemy as well. Also Absolute Mirror of, guess what, Equity. Now his next skill is the Complete Awakening Hess King. This is going to be a 5-turn cooldown available on turn 1. This is a skill that you are going to be keeping up for this attack boost. 250% attack boost for 5 turns to the caster. Increases the multiplier of Absolute Mirror of Equity and Final Mirror of Equity by 0.5 to the caster and gives you triple katana art. So if you want the attack boost, this is a skill that you're definitely going to go for. You don't really care too much about the other ones here, as this doesn't buff Mirror of Equity Universe by 0.5. Final Mirror of Equity here is a 4-turn cooldown available on turn 4. Physical damage 1.0 to one enemy with physical damage 11 times with ignore 50% defense on that back end. So this is also Absolute Mirror of Equity. That final hit is a 22 times mod right here. And this also gives a 0.5 mod increase for 4 turns to the caster for Absolute Mirror of Equity and Mirror of Equity Universe. His final cooldown skill is Cutting a Path for the Future, which is a skill you can use in an emergency, in a pinch. You can't dual cast it, you can't triple cast it. It's a 10-turn cooldown available on turn 1. It will give everyone in your party an AoE 50% auto revive for 3 turns. So if you guys are struggling out there in a certain trial fight and you need to put some sort of AoE re-raise up, your healer's re-raise AoE is down, you can take a turn off, maybe your friend DPS is dead, you can use Cutting a Path through the Future here and apply that AoE auto revive to your entire party. Now, as you can see, we don't have Mirror of Equity Universe in these skills, so it's going to be unlocked from his limit burst, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's go over his passives real quick. He does have a lot of passives here. On the offensive side, he has 50% attack, 50% ice resist, an additional 30% fire and ice resist, 4 limit burst gauge per turn, a 50% defense, and an additional 50% fire resist. So he's got 80% fire, 80% ice resist there. 50% HP, some auto refresh, spirit and MP passives, high tide of 150%. He's immune to paralysis, confusion, disease, and petrify. All very prominent things to be immune to here. 50% attack when equipped with a katana, 30% attack passive on top of that, 100% true double hand. He has a 100% chance to ignore fatal damage when his HP is above 30%, so you can't get hit by a single skill to drop him for above 30% HP to dead. He's going to live at least one time there. His Trust Master reward, which is very important here, 50% attack, an additional 4 limit burst gauge crystals per turn, and it upgrades his limit burst. So keep that in mind. You're definitely going to want to have that active. Grand Shell Sword Arts Lasswell, 20% defense, HP, and MP, as well as 50% additional true double hand. 20% spirit, 40% attack, and then 50% limit burst damage. So you can see he gets a lot of attack passives here, a lot of tanky passives as well. HP, defense, spirit, immunity to paralysis, confusion, petrifying, disease. Some of the most prominent status of elements that you need to be immune to, and 150% base true double hand. All very, very powerful things. And don't forget, if you're using his Trust Master reward, you're going to get an additional 50% true double hand from that. So you need some martial gloves or a buster style, and then you're going to be capped out on your true double hand right then and there. His conditional stuff we'll get to in a minute. Let's go down to Omni Blade Star Slicer Upgraded. This is the upgraded version of his limit burst. I know it's a wall of text here. It is a 14 hit skill that costs 36 limit burst crystals. It's a little bit expensive, but remember, he has 8 limit burst gauge crystal per turn in his kit passively. So this is going to actually fill up quite easily. And he also has 150% high tide on top of that passively. It does a 20 times multiplier with ignore 50% defense to all enemies. So it's 40 times multiplier. It's actually a very hard hitting limit burst. And remember, he has 50% limit burst damage bonus as a passive on top of that. He doesn't have any sort of active limit burst damage increase, nothing like Awaken King Rain. Oh my goodness. Eldor King Rain does with his nice 200% limit burst damage bonus, or Regina or Crown Prince Noctis. He doesn't have any of those buffs. So he's not really a limit burst damage dealer, but he does do pretty good damage with his limit burst here. It also increases the multipliers of various Mirror of Equity skills by 2.5 for 5 turns to the caster. And then this is the big one right here. Increases the mod of Mirror of Equity Universe by 4.0 for 5 turns to the caster, unlocks triple cast for 5 turns to the caster, and then enables Mirror of Equity Universe, obliterating Mirror of Equity Azure's Frost, obliterating Mirror of Equity's Crimson Flame for 5 turns as well. These are his big skills that you're going to be wanting to be using with CG Lasswell. So let's get into these skills real quick. These are his big powerhouses, and we're not talking about the Blizzaga and Aroga you see on the screen there, the old level 1 Lasswell magic. Here is his conditional stuff. He has triple katana art, which is activated by all the various things we've talked about so far. Very powerful, triple cast. We have Mirror of Equity's Universe. It's an absolute Mirror of Equity skill. The first 7 hits are a 1.0 multiplier. That final hit is a 19.0 multiplier. So very powerful, 20 times multiplier. You're saying that's pretty lackluster. Remember though, when you use your limit burst, this gets a 4.0 multiplier increase. Now that 4.0 multiplier increase is applied 3 times to the skill. It's going to be applied, as always, once to the front end of the skill, and then once to the back end of the skill, but the back end of the skill also has ignore 50% defense, so it's actually going to be a 12.0 multiplier increase, which just the limit burst damage multiplier increase alone is going to take this from a 20.0 multiplier to a 32 times multiplier. You can get a little bit more from that as well with other skills that we talked about. You can get up to, I believe, like a 34 relatively easily. If you go out of your way to get a big burst turn, you can get up to a 36, but most of the time you're going to be going for a 34. We have obliterating Mirror of Equity's Flame here as well, and obliterating Mirror of Equity's Frost. These aren't really going to be used here because, well, they just kind of, you burn the enemy and it's not that good, and the other one has some stop on it and it's not that good. But obliterating Mirror of Equity's Crimson Flame and obliterating Mirror of Equity's Azure Frost, these are going to be your 100% imperils. These also are absolute Mirror of Equity chaining frame families here. On top of that, their multipliers aren't the craziest thing, but they're not the lowest thing in the world. They're 15 times, but they also are going to get a couple of small multiplier increases there. You're usually using these for the imperils. If you have someone to outside imbue and imperil your Lasswell for you, he's going to be able to just spam Mirror of Equity Universe, but he's not necessary to have an outside imbuer and imperiler for him. Now let's go over what sort of a rotation of sorts it is going to be for Lasswell. He does look like he'd be pretty complicated, but really he's not that complicated at all, right? Your goal is going to be spamming Mirror of Equity, Absolution Universe, whatever it's called, Mirror of Equity Universe. You want to get his limit burst, use Mirror of Equity Universe. So your first couple of turns really is just going to be focused on you unlocking this damage through his LB. He doesn't have anything that's going to just straight up fill his limit burst for you right away, but you're going to be using Complete Awakening Hess. You're going to want this for that 250% attack buff right away, and then you're probably just going to imbue yourself with one of your self-imbue skills. You choose Fire or Ice. After that, if your limit burst isn't filled up yet, which it probably won't be, you just kind of mess around, do some damage, maybe unlock Triple Katana Arts further with your Recover MP HP skill, maybe do some more damage with Pyroglacial Destruction and get your 80% Fire and Ice Imperil there as well. You also on turn 2 will have True Mirror of Equity. Once you get his limit burst, remember he has 8 passive limit burst gauge crystals per turn, 150% high tide. You can also increase this further, right? I did say he needed 100% more true double hand. Throw 2 martial gloves on him, right? That's going to give you 12 limit burst gauge crystal per turn, which is cap in the game. And you can also give him some sort of high tide buff, maybe some high tide gear of your choice as well. Get his high tide up to 300%. with an outside buff, maybe a couple pieces of gear. And it's going to be a lot easier to just get his limit burst off back to back to back. Once you actually have his limit burst off, his strongest thing that you're going to want to be doing is literally just casting Mirror of Equity Universe. Just like any other character in the game, you're going to want to have your imperils up on the enemy for whatever element you're using, and you want to have the element imbued on your weapon, whether he's doing it himself or someone else is doing it for you. So that's pretty much all you really need to do with him. You can do some other stuff too. You have Mirror of Equity, Final Mirror of Equity here, which can give you a 0.5 multiplier on top of that. Final Mirror of Equity, he does get no buffs from his limit burst to Final Mirror of Equity. So like nothing comes close to just using the big old Mirror of Equity universe back to back to back. And that's why these buffs come in that are pretty significant. 5-turn unlock, 5-turn triple cast, 5-turn 4 times mod increase. So you're only going to have to use your limit burst every couple of turns, right? Every 4 or so turns, you're going to use his limit burst and then start doing big damage. She's very similar to Elena in that sense, where Elena liked to use her limit burst to get those big multiplier increases, and then you do a bunch of damage for a couple turns. You have to use your limit burst once again. Unlike Elena, her mod buffs only lasted 2 turns. His allow him to do damage for 4 turns with his. So that's going to be Hess King Lasswell, very powerful character out there. He is going to be a lot better than he was in the JP version for a lot of players out there, because as I failed to mention in the previous video when we were going over the news, there are actually some two-handed katanas that aren't super TMRs for you guys to get access to, right? We have the Oni Maru Plus from Alespris. You get Alespris's Oni Maru, and then you actually can craft in the crafting screen in FFBE. You can actually craft the Oni Maru Plus from that, which is going to be a two-handed katana. Very powerful. You're going to want to have a two-handed weapon on him because he is a two-handed true double hand unit. And then you also have, I do believe there's some sort of water katana associated with Kaito. Now, if you have a water katana, you're going to need some sort of water imperiler in your team for you as well there, but that is also another option. And JP is super TMRs or bust for two-handed katanas. Hess King Lasswell has some non-super TMR options that are very good for him in the two-handed katana market there in FFB. If you want to see more stuff like this, guys, go ahead, hit that subscription button, hit the join button too if you're looking to support the channel by becoming a channel member. Get those videos when they do come out early, actually, before they even come out, guys. Thank you guys so much for the support in any way, shape, or form, whether it's just watching the videos, Patreon. You guys are all fantastic people out there. We'll be streaming tonight, as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.